Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Tek Caffe Podcast, airing live from Egypt and the United States. My name is 𝗏𝗲𝗰𝗶𝗁, and I'll be your host for today. Please allow me to welcome our guest speaker, Paige Watson, who will talk to us today about fluid scaling technology, FAST for short. Glad to have you with us today, Paige.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
We are as excited as you are. So, Paige is a technical coach and consultant with over 25 years of experience. He's an internationally known technical coach who speaks and teaches worldwide. He understands the need for quality software as craft practices and has been able to help dozens of teams create well-crafted software and processes for maturing into high-performing scaling teams. Glad to have you with us today, Paige. And before we start, please allow me to introduce Tek Caffe. So, Tek Caffe is a startup company dedicated to empowering the tech community and enabling creativity and innovation in the tech industry. Along with running the Tek Caffe podcast, we offer software professional services, including technical workshops in many areas such as TDD, BDD, extreme programming, domain-driven design, and many more engineering practices. And we also provide technical consulting. Our podcast has aired 22 episodes so far since 2023. This year, we were honored to have James Carpenter a few weeks ago, who spoke to us about less. And today we have Paige Watson. We have hosted many great speakers that presented many topics, including scaling agile teams, TDD, software architecture, artificial intelligence, and many more. Last year, we were community partners with Startups Without Borders and Impact. And we also sponsored the DevOps Days Cairo events. Visit our website to learn more about Tek Caffe and to contact us if you're interested in any of our services. And without further ado, I leave the mic to Paige, who'll talk to us today about fast agile. Paige, the mic is all yours.
Thank you very much. So first, hello. A little about me. I live outside of Seattle, Washington in the United States, where today it's a lovely -1 Celsius. I'm excited to talk about fast fluid scaling technology. It's something that's very dear to my heart. It's something that I was there as we sort of came into understanding fast. One of the first places we did this was a health insurance company here in Washington State, and so it's pretty amazing to be able to talk about it around the world now. Before we begin talking about fast, though, I want to talk about the 𝗀𝗃 framework. The 𝗀𝗃 framework is from Dave Snowden, and it's 4 domains that describe cause and effect relationships. So I'm not going to get too deep into this, but I think it's important to understand where we are in this framework in terms of creating software. And the 2 domains that I specifically want to focus on or talk about are the complicated and the complex. Right? Complicated endeavors are causal. You have a cause and effect. It's known. It's deterministic. You can reduce it to steps. It's completely defined and has finite dimensions, and it's predictable, like a car engine. It's complicated, but we know how it works. Like tax code, really complicated, but it doesn't change. It's not, it's deterministic. It's well and completely defined. Whereas the complex domain is non-causal and non-deterministic. It might not be reducible. Some parts of it might, but not all of it. We certainly haven't completely defined it. It's emergent and responsive. And the pattern's predictable, but the exact outcome isn't. the human body and sickness, and we're not exactly sure why sometimes we get sick and who gets sick from certain things, and necessarily how to always fix it. Weather is a great complex system. Creating great software is a complex endeavor, right? I'm going to give you an example of how we deal with the complex domain, and that is through simple rule sets. You can't apply very strong set rules to the complex domain, but you can to the complicated. So in the complex domain, for example, I'm going to talk about a roundabout. A roundabout is a very complex system, but it has simple rules. What are those rules? Well, in the United States, you look left, and if no one's coming, you go. Very simple. But the cars move quicker. You get more traffic through the intersection faster. The traffic's smoother. You're not stopping and going. You're not backing up. Very simple rule set to control a complex endeavor. Does that work when we expand this? This is a roundabout in Swindon in the UK. Look at that. It's still a roundabout, but it's got 5 other roundabouts within it. And yet the domain rule set is very simple still. In this case, it's the UK. So you look right, and if no one's coming, you go. And as long as we all understand that rule set and abide by it, we move through this intersection faster. And in fact, it's quite an amazing study of how this roundabout works. You could look it up sometime if you're interested, because you don't actually have to go all the way around to get from one place to the other. It's very complex, and yet simple rule sets make it super effective. So let's talk about the high-level overview of fluid scaling technology. And really, the idea here is that we bring everyone together to work as one collective. So instead of having multiple teams, multiple feature teams or such, we bring them all together to create one collective. We visually represent our goals on a wall so that we give everybody all the information they need, almost a radical communication, just to make sure that all that information is always available to anyone who'd like to see it. We let the collective self-organize into teams, break down and do the work themselves. And then on a short cadence, we sync and repeat the above steps. And I'm going to get into this a little bit more. There are some sort of, how would I say, surrounding modules. So if we look at the core of FAST being this method of creating the collective, throwing all the work on the wall, breaking into groups and breaking down the work and then repeating. Around that, we also have things like forecasting, product management, management innovation, small and large scale FAST teams, self-improvement and system improvement. And those are really important, but you don't need to do all of those things to necessarily do FAST. The 3 things that I'd really like to talk about and focus on today are very sort of foundational to fluid scaling technology. And those are self-organization, dynamic reteaming, and very short value cycles. So in the beginning, this is my friend 𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 he tells it much better, but he was sitting there watching this open space conference organized and thought, amazing. If there are 800 people here that can self-organize a conference in 20 minutes, why aren't we using this open space technology to solve agile scaling, right? We're allowing those people to organize the conference, and we have a simple rule set around it. how can we apply this in the way that we build software? If you're not familiar with Open Space Conference, it's a conference, and I really think you should try it because it's amazing. It's a conference that there's no agenda when you start. Here's a picture. I don't know. I think maybe this was New Orleans in 2014, maybe. I'm not sure exactly which picture this is, but basically all these people are sitting around at the beginning of the day for the conference, and they're going to organize the agenda for the conference at this morning meeting. Then as they organize, on the wall, there's a grid, and that grid has rooms that they're going to have the conference meetings in, and times. And you'll notice the large sticky notes. You come up and you put like what you want to talk about or what you want to hear about on a sticky note, and then you go over to the board and you put it on the board and say, I'm going to talk about fluid scaling technology, and I'm going to be in the yellow balloons room at 2:15, and I put it up there. And other people do this also, and this is the way that we create an agenda for the conference. And the reason it works, again, it's a very complex endeavor, and it works because we have a simple rule set. And there are 4 rules that we have for open space. And this all comes from Harrison Owen's Open Space Technology book. You can pick it up. It's a great read. But those 4 rules are: whoever comes are the right people. Whatever happens is the only thing that could happen. Whenever it starts is the right time to start, and whenever it ends is the right time to end. And if we keep those rules in mind, and there's one law, and that law is what's called the law of personal mobility, which says if you find yourself in a situation where you're neither learning nor contributing, move somewhere where you can learn or contribute. So with this in mind, we thought, how can we apply this to software development? How do we apply this to our teams? We did a lot of experimentation. We did a lot of obviously iteration through process and practice. And what's come out of that is fluid scaling technology. I'm going to take a little drink here. So the 3 things I said I was going to talk about today are self-organization, dynamic reteaming, and short values. Let's talk about self-organization first. When we do FAST, we have one meeting. And I know this is quite a busy image, but it walks us through most of the parts of FAST. We have one meeting where everyone attends, and this meeting lasts about 30 minutes, very much like an open space meeting at the beginning of the day, where we're organizing our work and we're creating the teams, and we are communicating all the information that needs to be communicated to the rest of the collective. We create a marketplace, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but in that marketplace, we put the work that we're going to do for the value cycle. And we call them value cycles because they're not necessarily iterations in the sense of other frameworks where you have work that's supposed to be done within that iteration. We have a value cycle. It's a time frame where we come back and we talk about the value that we've added during that time frame. And again, I'll get to that a little bit later as well. So we have this meeting, and this is how we set up our work. And I kind of go through this real quickly. Again, it's not necessarily the focus of the talk, but in the meeting, we're going to self-organize into teams. And that means we have product directors or product people who will put the work that they'd like to see get done in the value cycle on the board. That doesn't mean that we necessarily have to do what they are asking. We often have a set amount of work in progress slots, very much like the open space marketplace. And we'll take work and fill up those slots. People will step up and say, I'd like to work on this, and I'm going to be in room 1. And we'll fill up the slots. Everybody will choose where they are most effective and go to that and work with that group for the value iteration, the value cycle. And then we'll get back together at the end of the value cycle and we'll do this again. We'll synchronize. We'll talk about what we did, what we learned, what value we got out of it. Again, I'll go into this a little bit more as we go. The next thing that we really had was process improvement, and that's the process guild. The process guild in this case, well, it's not necessarily a requirement for FAST. Continuing to grow and define and refine your process is very important. And so this process guild was a place that we got together. We were able to sit down. Anyone who wanted to show up that was part of the collective could. We would suggest changes. We would suggest experiments. We would decide, are we doing the right thing? Is this the best thing? Is there something that we could do better or change to make things more effective? And then we would bring that to the team, and we had a decision-making process that would allow us to choose to move forward with that or not. And the third thing we had was experiments. And I really think experiments are important. Experiments are how we make ourselves better. Experiments allow us to find the better way. And we do that by setting a start and end date. For example, for the next 3 weeks, starting next Monday, for the next 3 weeks, we're all going to work collectively on work, and we're going to see if it works better. We have expected outcomes. I expect that if we work collaboratively, for the next couple of weeks, we'll see higher quality and better knowledge sharing and more value added. And so we go through that experiment, and at the end of it, we retro on it. We talk about, was this what we expected? Did it work? Was it the right thing? Is there a change to the experiment we could try to make our processes better? All these things combined actually were before we started doing FAST. And this is actually where we kind of came to this understanding of what fluid scaling technology is today. And we continue to experiment and evolve it. This picture that I have here of the fluid scaling technology process is not the same picture. Actually, I just changed it this morning. It's not the same picture that I had a couple days ago. And thanks to a really great guy, 𝗏𝗏 𝗏𝗏, who's a coach in Copenhagen and is very strong in the FAST, like FAST teaching and coaching and stuff. He's done these great images, and we continue to refine them. Excuse me. So a really important part of this is self-selection. I talked a little bit about it, but self-selection, where we get everyone together and we trust the team to do the right thing. We're software developers. We create software. It's our career. Whether we're stronger on the back end or on the front end, or we're data people, or we're stronger in test, or we're stronger with product, all of those things, we are still software creators, and we know how to do our job. And this is really important. to the fluid scaling technology practice is that we trust that the team understands how to do their job, and we trust that the team will do the right thing. This doesn't mean that we assign work to the team. It means that we allow the team to choose the work that's necessary, with the understanding that they will actually talk to the business also, right? And this picture here is actually one of the first times we were doing FAST. We had about 50 people in our collective, and we had a large FAST marketplace where you can see I'm kind of standing at it on the far right. But the person in the red shirt in the lower right-hand corner, he was our product director. He was the product person. And unlike other frameworks or other styles of working, his job wasn't necessarily to be a major, like right in front of everybody assigning the work. His job was to be there to answer questions. And you notice he's kind of standing back. And that's a really important concept, is it's not about assigning the work to the collective. It's about saying, here's the work that the business would like. How are you guys going to make sure that we get the appropriate work done to satisfy their requirements, along with writing your good software? A little picture. Here's a picture of one of the first FAST marketplaces. This wasn't the big one that we had. This was a smaller team that was doing it. But you'll notice it looks a lot like that open space marketplace, or that open space grid, right? We didn't have times, of course, but we did have, in this case, five rooms or 5 teams. And that was our WIP limit of 5. And we'd ask the product director to put work he'd like to see done on the board. A person would step up and say, I'm going to work on this, and I'll be in the first team area. And they would put it in that first slot, and they would put their name. We had names on magnets, and they would put their name at the top. You see the names across the top. Those are what we called the story stewards. It wasn't their job to be the subject matter expert. They weren't the leader of the team. Their job was to steward the story through the process. It meant they weren't necessarily the ones that would unblock people if there was a blocker or a dependency. Their job was to find someone that could help out with that, right? They weren't in charge of making sure work got done. Their job was to steward the process and talk about the value added when we came back to the marketplace, and all those sort of clerical aspects to it. Oftentimes the steward had a little more vested interest in seeing the work get done, which is why they took the work and put it on the board. And then the other magnets that you see are other people on the team. And again, this was a small team, but they would take their magnets and say, I'm going to go work on this, with this group. And we would split up into that group for the short value cycle. At the end, we would come back and we would discuss what value was added. All of the work would come out of the work in progress slots. Some of it might be done, some might not, but we would go through the process again. And okay, excuse me. Let's talk a little bit about the dynamic reteaming aspect of it. I think dynamic reteaming is really important to creating great software. Why is that? Well, usually we have 3 teams, right? And we want to assign the work to the team so that they can focus in a certain area or for a certain feature. And we get to a point where we have dependencies on other teams. right? If we're making a login page, and this is just a contrived example, but if we're making a login page, well, the certificate is going to, we have to check the certificate expiration. Is that the API team that does that, or the security team? And who's going to update it? And who's going to tell us what the process is or create the process? How do we choose what team that is without overloading a team with too much work? Or the federated login, does that go through security? Does that go through the API team? You know, all of these things, instead of choosing to assign the work to teams, instead what we do is we bring all of those teams into a single collective, all of those teams that are dependent upon each other, that have dependencies. Why not just put them together and let them work or form around the work? So we talked a little about the law of personal mobility. If we go back to this from open space, this is really important in the way that we work in fluid scaling technology. In the open space, it was, if you find yourself in a situation where you're neither learning nor contributing, you go someplace else where you can. But in FAST, the idea is you go to the team where you can affect a positive change, where you can add value. And sometimes maybe that team there's a team that you could add value to because I'm strong, I understand certificates, and I could be a part of that. But there's already someone or two people on there that have the same knowledge of me as I do. In that case, as a member of the collective, you have the responsibility to go to another team and work with them for the value cycle, where you can learn and grow and become better at your job. And maybe that's something, maybe I'm not a UI person, but I want to learn some UI work. So I can go work with the UI, whoever's working on the UI, work this value cycle. And I can learn about it, and I can give my input, right? As a how do you say, like, as a back-end developer, which I've done for many years, right? There are times when I have discussions with the UI people, and they have a totally different understanding of what they're expecting the data to be when it comes out of the API back-end. And I wasn't thinking about that, but because we're now working together on the same team, as opposed to being dependencies remotely, we're able to have that discussion and create the output of the API in a way such that we both understand, and it's much more effective, and there's more value to it, right? So we form around the work, and we choose the work based on what the collective understands is the most important next step to getting the good work done. And so in this case, we finished the first 3 items. The collective then chooses the next 3 that are the most important. And the most important aspect, I think Tim Ottinger has a great way of talking about it when he says, you work on the most important thing that the application doesn't do right now, right? And that's up to the collective working with the business to figure out what's the most important thing that the application doesn't do right now. And let's work on that. So form around the work, form teams around the work, instead of forming teams and trying to give them work. Short value cycles are important. When we talk about short value cycles, the reason that we want that is for a fast feedback loop. And that's a repeating cycle where team members can share information, evaluate it, update it, and repeat that process. And the goal here is to get both the positive and negative feedback and immediately put that back into the process. Did this work? Let's do more of it. Did this not work? Let's do less of it. What's the appropriate way to work in this area? What did we find when we practiced this? this really, really sort of was very evident in doing fast, in that we had very short value cycles. In fact, our value cycles we found most effective came to be 2 days. 2 days seems like it's very, very fast, but I think it's very effective because we get that feedback to the rest of the collective, to the business, to the customer more rapidly, and we can more rapidly iterate on their response to that feedback. A really great example of this is if you're doing some sort of iteration of 2 weeks, right? And you're working on something pretty hard. You get to say it's Monday to Friday, 2 weeks, right? You get to the second Wednesday and you're still not able to get it necessarily done, or you're finding that, oh my gosh, I'm blocked and this is not going to work the way we're thinking of. There's 2 things that I see that often happen. One, at the end of that iteration, you go back and you're like, I couldn't get it done. I really tried, but we found I worked 2 weeks on it and I banged my head against the wall and it's not going to work. The other thing that happens sometimes is that we think, oh, I have to get this done. I've got 2 days left, and I start shoving code in there. And that's when you can actually start to introduce bugs. You start to get sort of sloppy. You start to try and make it work at any cost. If you didn't have to get the work done, but we're working in two-day value cycles. Every 2 days, you come back and say, look, here's the value I've added. Maybe it's done, maybe it's not. Maybe it's released to the customer, maybe it's not, but you have value that you've added. You can get the feedback from the rest of the team or from the business side, but you can also immediately give that feedback of, I worked on this for 2 days. I don't think it's going to work this way, or we've been going down this route for a couple cycles, and now we're getting to a blocked section, and I could use help on this from someone else. Or the faster you can get the feedback, the more effective you can be. And I think that not having to be done with the work in a value cycle is quite empowering to creating great software. Right? That doesn't mean we don't have to get things finished, right? That's an argument I hear often. Well, how do you make sure things get finished? This process of empowering your team to continually add value, we want to get things done. We want to get things done as developers, right? I think that's sort of it's not a good argument to this. It just means that there's no requirement that necessarily things get finished in these 2 days. What it means is that you need to show value added. And sometimes that value is, we learned that this is not going to be, we're not going to be able to do it that way. We learned that the library we're expecting to use doesn't work with this version of our software. And therefore we've learned that we need to go find something else, as opposed to waiting 2 weeks to find out at the end of the 2-week iteration. So quick, short value cycles have been extremely effective. So those 3 are self-organization, dynamic reteaming, and short value cycles are sort of what I would think, what I call the most important parts of fluid scaling technology. Again, there are many parts, many additional parts around it, but these are sort of the core ideals that I think really make it shine well. And again, fast is simple. A simple rule set. We have a one-time setup where we bring all those dependent teams together to work as a collective, and we put all of our work on a wall, meaning that we make our work visible. If we're remote, that means maybe we have a wiki where we have everything, or we have I've worked on remote fast teams where we had a Zoom room open and it was always on, and we posted that link everywhere. We posted it in Teams and Slack, and anyone, C-suite or business or clients or other developers, anyone could click that link and join us in Zoom at any time. And that was a way, sort of like walking by your desk, right? It was a way that we could shorten that feedback cycle and get the feedback from people outside of the collective. And then the collective organizes and self-selects into teams. We go do the work on a very short cadence. We meet back together and synchronize. And while we're together, we kick off the next cycle and do it again. I put all of these resources online. You're welcome to go to my website, and I can make these slides available, or you can use this, the QR code will take you right there. And so let's get to some questions. I know there's often a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paige, for this wonderful presentation about FAST. I certainly have a lot of questions, and I'm sure these will be the kind of questions that will come up to people's minds, especially people who are practicing Agile using Scrum and these kinds of frameworks. So the first thing I want to ask about is planning. Okay.
Yes.
So there definitely has to be some sort of planning that is being done in FAST. I know that you've definitely, skipped a lot of topics because you wanted to focus on what you named the, important aspects of FAST. But yeah, that business people, they like, to have some sort of predictability and to know when they will expect to see this thing done. Okay, this is just the way it works. So how does that happen in FAST?
Yeah, and again, you're right. I did focus on 3 core parts, and there are many other parts. And two things I heard you talk about or ask about there: the planning and estimation, right? Both of which I think are important and understandably necessary. Let's conquer estimation first, because I think in FAST we don't estimate in the same way that other frameworks do. It's not a this is a story pointed thing or fruit or whatever. One of the better ways to do sort of estimated planning, I guess, is through Monte Carlo estimations. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I'm familiar, but maybe we can, just give a short description about it.
Sure. So the Monte Carlo estimation actually is a scenario where you take known data. So if we look back and we say, for the last 6 months, it's taken us, we've done X number of stories, and, it's taken us this long. And we put that into basically an Excel spreadsheet, and it does calculations, and it does iterations of its calculations, something like, 50,000. It's a huge number, but it comes out with an estimation of like completed date. So you can say, like, it's January 18th now. We're looking at, maybe we have 47 stories. And again, we're not talking about the story pointing. We're talking about the larger scale. We have 47 things to work on, And we have a confidence level that by March 13th, 90% of them will be finished. If we wait until June 15th, we can confidently say that 98% are done. If we look at February 12th, we can only have a confidence that, 10% are going to be done. Whatever, I'm making up numbers on the fly, but this is what the Monte Carlo simulation does. It simulates the possibilities in a very large scale and gives you a confidence of your finish date. This is one of the better ways of actually estimating our work. And in FAST, I suppose you could do a much stronger estimation. This is not what I expect, what I would recommend, right? I think that as you work with the business, and this is a big thing, because this is not just a developer practice. It's not just a bunch of developers in a room and then, and do it in a collective and everybody else external. The business has to be part of this. The business is part of this communication that the developers have, and they make themselves available and they get the feedback. And we used to kind of joke that we had to train our product people. And the training was that as we did these rapid iterations and as they started to see the value that we were adding each value cycle, it became more apparent to them that we were actually working hard on getting this done in a quality way, and that we cared about the product just as much as they did. Right? So you kind of have to bring them together as part of this, which can be a little harder, right? But I think that the more that they see the value that you can add with FAST, the more that the less that they necessarily need those estimations in a very smaller, like how long is this story going to take? And the more that Monte Carlo practices sort of give them what they need to say, all right, we have a 90% confidence that by March we'll have this much done, right? The other was architecture or planning, right? And again, we always had a roadmap. We had a like, here's where we want to start. Here's kind of where we want to end. And here are some things we want to do in the middle, right? But you can't map out, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. What you can do is you can say, this is the most important thing we think that the application should do, and go work on it, right? And then get that feedback, get that see that value that's added, and say, is this still the most important thing that the application should do? If it is, we'll continue to work on it until we get it in front of our customers. But because we have very short value cycles, the business also has the ability to make that change and say, yeah, we wanted it blue with gold stripes, and then we wanted it to talk. It's blue. It doesn't have stripes and it doesn't talk, but it's okay now. It's good enough that we can put this in front of the customers and move on. Right. And so this is one of the values of having those short cycles and having that communication, that radical communication of putting everything in view of everybody. In terms of, designing or architecturing, that all falls to the collective. And oftentimes we would have those sort of separate meetings. Maybe one of the things that goes on the board isn't necessarily code to write, but instead it's a discussion of, okay, we want to attach to this API, external API. What do you think the best place to call it is? I'm going to be in room 1 and I need a couple people to come help me decide this. Right? So it wasn't an architecture meeting outside of the collective. It was part of the value cycle. And that work, all the work was part of the value cycle. And again, you could self-select into that group, into that team for that value cycle to help come up and discuss where we're going with the architecture.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So I will have follow-up questions after that, but there's one question from the attendees. It's kind of long, so I think I need to yeah, okay. So yeah, thanks for the presentation. I have a question, please, in case we have a small team and we'll take the chance of using Fluid to scale. Do you have any recommendations that we should do before starting our scaling process, as transferring a team from process to a new one may cause some confusion for them? So do you have any suggestions that we should have it done or get it ready before going ahead with Fluid? Okay, that's a good question. Yeah.
Yes, it is. And I think it's important to talk about. So I'm going to, let me go back to this slide with it was up near the beginning. Where'd it go? Okay. Yeah, okay, this doesn't necessarily have what I want. Oh, that's all right. When we talk about starting this, right, a really important thing to have is psychological safety on a team. You have to be able to build this team. Oftentimes, companies talk about we want to try fast. It's really exciting. You know, we can see the importance of the short value cycle and how it's going to affect us. How do we start? And the first thing that I say is you have to have like that psychological safety on a team. You have to have things like a team charter or team working agreements that the team has agreed on, not ones that you assign or choose, but let them assign and choose how they're going to work, what their agreements around that work is. How are they going to improve themselves? How are they going to, when there's conflict, how are they going to resolve conflict? This is all something that the team needs to be able to do to really work well in this, in FAST. It requires a mature team, and that maturity requires that they become, mature in their work themselves, which is, I don't want that to sound flippant. I don't want to sound that I'm not saying that developers aren't mature in their work, but it's different. It's very different. And we used to say that you have to be an adult. You have to be able to step forward and say, this is important and this isn't, and I'm responsible and we're all responsible. And how do we get there? One of the best ways when you want to start this is to ask, right? It's often hard if you say, here's 3 teams, we're going to shove you together. Congratulations, you're a collective, now do fast. That doesn't work, because you always get a couple people, or maybe more than a couple, who are like, I don't want to do this. I was comfortable doing what we were doing before. But you do have some people that are like, well, this is interesting. Maybe this could be good for us. So if you're going to start a new team, a new collective, my first suggestion would be ask. Say, hey, we want to start this group that's going to do great things. We're not gonna break you into feature teams, but we're going to allow you to self-select and dynamically reteam and effectively do the work that you know how to do. Who wants to be part of it? And lay that out there. Give them an understanding of what those processes are before they choose to join. Because when they join, then they'll come in with that knowledge of, this is what's expected of me, and I agree to be part of this. That's not the easy answer, right? But it's probably the effective answer. I think if you can't necessarily set up a new collective and ask people to join, then it becomes a little harder. You actually have to step back and go to the team and say, this is really exciting. I found this thing that might be very helpful to us. What do you guys think? And would you like to try it? And maybe we try an experiment. Okay, for the next 3 months, we're going to try this. And then we're going to, we're going to retro on it. We're going to talk about what's working and what's not, right? The really nice thing about FAST, again, simple rule sets around complex endeavors. Those simple rule sets are a little looser. When we say, put everybody in a collective, create teams, go do work, I'm not saying exactly how you should do that. I'm giving you examples of what works, and I'm giving you, the very basic rule set. But it's up to the team to figure out how they want to work from that. I've always worked, when I've done FAST, I've always worked collaboratively, both pairing, but mostly in like whole team programming or ensemble groups, or however you want to call them, but collaborative groups. But I know that there are certain companies out there right now that are doing FAST that don't do that. They still work solo on their work. And I don't know exactly how that works, but that's something that's up for the collective to decide, again, in those working agreements, how they're going to work and sticking to that. And I hope that answered the question. There's a lot to it, but I think educating your teams and asking them to improve themselves and their process and experimenting with it will move you in this direction.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now here's one hard question. Okay. So I read somewhere in the version 2.12 guide that you can use FAST in other frameworks. Okay. Now, the first thing that will come into my mind is, when you said frameworks, did you mean other scaling frameworks? So that's the first question. And if yes, how do you imagine applying FAST in something like SAFe, for example? And have you seen people, or have you heard from, come across people who have went through this experience?
Yeah. So first off, I haven't. I'm not really sure how big a collective can be at its largest. We were 50 people. Although I've done it with 12, I've done it with 50. I've heard of other companies doing it with 80 something, 86, I think was the number. There's the theory is that maybe we could get up to Dunbar's number, which is about 150 people before the collective starts to break down. How do we go beyond that? You could probably use FAST in a SAFe environment. I don't, again, it would require a little bit of experimentation and process change, maybe. The whole idea behind FAST, and the reason it works so well, is because we, instead of having those dependency teams, teams that are dependent on one another, we shove those all together. So if we think about that in a very large sort of a SAFe environment, you could have all the teams that are dependent. You could have many collectives that are then deploying with the SAFe process. I'm not as familiar with SAFe as other people are, but the theory's there that you could do that. You could have a collective of collectives, possibly. Again, I haven't seen it at a giant number. Um, I'd love to. I'd love to, and I'm actually going to start working at a very large company here in the next couple months, and there's the possibility that we will maybe we will be able to try it out at a very large on a very large scale. If so, I'd love to report that back and tell you how that works, because
Well, I was about to say that. So yeah, we'll definitely need to have another episode to share this experience.
yes.
Yeah, because that's very important. Okay, so we have another question, but let me just move the camera to see it. So yeah. Okay, thanks for the presentation. While I could not attend the session fully, but how does performance management work in this way of working? That's a good question.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is again, all these are great questions. They're questions that we often have to deal with when we talk about this and when we coach this. What is it that you're measuring for performance? Right? Are you measuring the team? Are you measuring the collective? Are you measuring each person? I don't know that I have answers for all of those or any of those, right? In terms of when we're talking about like who gets the bonus and who gets the raise, and that sort of thing. I think that gets much more into sort of a management 3.0, maybe a teal type of organization, but that's not necessarily part of FAST in itself. What I can tell you is that on a very, in the collectives I've been in, the responsibility for the work sort of, everybody starts to become responsible for the work because of the way we work. You didn't write a bug. What happened was we let a bug get into production. That the wording changes from you and I did this and you did this and to we, right? And so how do we measure the performance around that? Well, we could look at, we could ask, stepping back, this is sort of the same question of how do you measure the performance of a team that's working collaboratively, that's doing ensemble or whole team programming, or how do you measure the performance of one person? I don't know that you can necessarily. Can I measure the performance of the team? Are we putting more in front of the customer? Are we creating more value? Are we writing less bugs? Are we having to take less time? Are we getting to production quicker from ideation to release? Is that funnel faster? All those numbers you can actually come up with because we can say we decided to work on this and then it went into production 3 days later. It used to take us 4 weeks, right? That we can measure. But how do we measure? I don't have a great answer for that. And there are people out there that do, but it's not necessarily, unfortunately, it's not something I'm versed enough to kind of give you an easy answer. I'd love to.
Is it fair to say, or is it accurate to say that performance management, there isn't one way of doing it that is coupled with one framework? Okay.
Yes.
If you have some sort of performance management that is already in place, you can still use that when you apply Fluid or some other framework.
I think so.
Yeah.
I agree. It might take a little tweaking, right? Because again, you're not assigning work to your developers and that you're saying, here's the work that we'd like to get done, who's going to work on it. And, but But yes, for the most part, you can still you could probably still maintain that. Maybe there's instead of like how many story points did you do, you can say how many, I don't know, how many of the teams in the collective, how many stories did you steward this last quarter or whatever.
Yeah, I'm perhaps on this part, I'm going to share a personal experience with a client I was working with this last year. I remember that the first thing we tried to teach was what is value, okay? And we first heard from the client what is their idea about value. I mean, when they say value, what do they exactly mean by value, okay? Because the problem is, sometimes every single person has his own or her understanding of what value means, okay? So the first thing we wanted to do was to capture that and use the right definition of value and agree on that, okay? So that was the first thing. And then the second thing we did was, now, how can we measure that whatever process we decide to follow is delivering value? And this is something we can agree upon, okay? And whatever that gives us from our perspective, an accurate measure of whether or not we are delivering value is something that we could agree that is working, okay?
Yeah.
So that's why I was saying this is something that teams can work on without really relating it to the kind of framework they're going to use, okay? But they have to have some sort of measure to make sure that whatever system they put in place to deliver value is really delivering value.
Yeah,
that's the important thing.
Yeah, and I would actually sort of circle back to the team charter. I think you should really be doing chartering with your teams and working agreements. But the charter is where that you say what defines the value that we are going to produce. How do we know when we've created value for our team, for our company, for our customers, right? Because you're right. If we all don't have an understanding of that, then we don't really have a way to see if we're improving either.
Yeah.
Not overall.
Yeah, because unfortunately, some people define value as basically throughput. How much can this team deliver, irrespective of whether or not this how much is making any sense or not in terms of business.
As much as I don't think that's the most effective, it could be a great start. You could say again, but you have to measure. It's not the number of stories. It has to be the time, like the time from we came up with this idea and decided it was a priority to the time it gets in production in front of our customers. Like, is that getting shorter? Because there's that's a good measurement of at least our process, right? And then we can know what are those
time, right? Yeah.
Pardon?
You're referring to lead time, right?
Yes. Yeah. And then we can look and say, what are the things that are slowing us down there? And maybe it's our process. Maybe it's we continue to write a lot of bugs and we have to, go back and fix those all the time, or maybe it's that, there's no great way of deciding who's going to work on this. And then, or we have to do pull request reviews, all the time. And that's slowing us down. Like, all these things are things we can look at and say, what's going to make it better and more effective? And then as that number changes, we can say, okay, according to our decision about what is value, we're making progress and getting better.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, so We have another question from Nariman.
Yeah.
So it is easy for management team to start the transformation. Yeah, we've all been there. So yeah, I know you're reading it as well. So I'll just jump into the question. So what are your expectations about when they will be able to stand alone without a coach? So I'm guessing what Nariman is trying to say, that teams need to start with a coach, especially when it's something that is totally new to them. Okay. And not just the teams, maybe it's the whole company. And yeah, what is the exit criteria, if that is the right term to use, for the coach? Yeah.
So I'll try and use an example. I'm guessing that there's not a lot of ice hockey in your area. You know, there might be some, but there's probably not a lot. Right.
Yeah.
If you wanted to,
are aware of it. Yeah. People know it. Yeah.
Yeah. If you wanted to create a team to play ice hockey, how long would it be before they don't need a coach? Right? Do they need a coach? And so it's a rather sort of blatant and contrived example, but the whole idea here, especially if they don't have an understanding of an effective experience in some sort of agile methodology or practice, you have to have someone who understands and not necessarily tells you what to do, but you need someone to help guide you. This is true of all of our learning. I can read a book and maybe get some understanding, but to really grow and become more knowledgeable, I need the ability to ask questions to someone with knowledge about that learning, right? Whether it be ice hockey or software development or agile methods or, you know, riding a bike, whatever it is, you need to be able to you need someone that has that experience that can help you improve. And in this case, a coach, a technical coach is a great person to do that, right? Does that mean that they have to have a coach forever? No, I don't have there's not a date I can give of how long it will be, right? But I think often it depends on the people there too. Sometimes you start to talk about like, hey, what could we try? You know, oftentimes I pose this question of like, if you could snap your fingers and make things better tomorrow, and I'm not going to tell you what better means, but if you could make things better tomorrow by snapping your fingers, what would that be? What would that look like? What's the first tiniest, smallest thing that would change to make things better? Right. And, you know, if the answer is, oh, well, maybe we didn't have so many meetings, right? Okay, well, as a coach, I can say, look, here's some ideas I have about communicating to everyone that we can do and have less meetings and still be effective about communicating, right? Because I have this experience and understanding of these processes. Or I wish we didn't have so many bugs. Okay, I have a good technical background in writing code. Here are some things I've found that will allow us to write less bugs and higher quality code. And we can try them if you're interested, right? Again, I'm not telling you have to do this, you have to pair, you have to whatever. What I'm telling you is, here are some ideas. Let's experiment with them. And because I'm the coach, you can come back and say, we tried that before, it didn't really work. And I'll say, okay, great, let's try it this way this time, you know. And so I really do think that to really transform and to become more effective and better, whatever that means, you need a coach. You need someone, you know, in this case, it's called a coach in our industry, but you need someone who has experience and can help facilitate that transition. And, you know, at some point, we found this with FAST as well. When I was working at that at that insurance company here in Washington State, we didn't really, we had my friend 𝗬𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 was sort of the coach, but he wasn't really a coach. He just had experience doing that. But then that's where I kind of started doing my coaching, because I was like, oh, I understand. Now I still needed help and understanding, but I could then coach other people, right? So it could be that you bring in a coach, they help you transform this team, the team gets going, you find people on the team who can fill that role, and you no longer have to have someone in that role, right? But that's
Let me share. You remember when I asked the question, I used the term exit criteria. Okay, so
yes.
there is a story behind that. Let me share it with you and perhaps capture your input or take on it. So what I've seen one company do is that they've defined the coach's exit criteria. And let me tell you how that company worked. Okay, so the coach was not someone they hired for a specific amount of time, and then, once the engagement was done, they would tell him thank you. No, there was actually a team of coaches, okay, and they had a lot of software development teams because they had hundreds of applications, and they would send a coach to a particular team until that team reaches to a specific maturity level, okay, and they had a maturity assessment based on some numbers, metrics, etc. And based on that, they said, if the team reaches to maturity level, say, as an example, 3 out of 4, that's good enough. We can remove the coach and move the coach to another team that we want to transform into an agile team. This is the way they did it, okay? So what do you think of that? Does that make sense? Can that work with?
I think it can. Yeah. I agree, it can. All right. I think that criteria needs to be agreed on in the beginning. Also, that criteria should probably be agreed on by the team as well. Right.
Yeah.
I think the team has to be an important part. It can't just be management and the coach making that decision. Right? Because the team is the one being coached. And maybe part of that agreement is that we sort of train people up on the team to sort of fulfill that role. Maybe not one person, but at least sort of empower them to all sort of fulfill that role as we're gone. And I don't know that it's often a like, okay, you've hit the date, you've hit the numbers, thanks, see you later, right? I think you would be much more effective by doing that, but saying, maybe in 6 weeks, why don't you come back for a week and make sure we're still continuing on track? And then, and then maybe next year you come back for a week after that, I think that's probably more effective and more helpful. There's a really great coach. His name was 𝗬𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, really amazing guy. And one of the things that he taught me is that he measures his success at how well the team does after he's gone.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a great measure, right? Because we want, as a coaches, we want the team, we don't want to have to be there. We want the team to understand and be able to pick it up and do it themselves. We kind of want to work ourselves out of a job, in that sense.
Yeah.
But yeah,
the DORA metrics, are they a good way of measuring how well the team is doing in Fluid?
I think it's better than a lot of other metrics, right? Again, I think that your, metrics are hard, just like naming, right? But metrics will, what's the adage that once you start to measure something, it no longer becomes like, once you start to measure something to achieve a goal, I'm just paraphrasing. But once you start to measure something to achieve a goal, it no longer becomes a good measurement because people will start focusing on that, you know, and like if we're talking about, if I get paid for the number of lines of code I write, guess how many lines of code I'm going to write? You know, I'm going to write, they're not going to be quality. I'm not going to refactor to delete lines of code, right? You know, so yes, I think the DORA metrics are one of the better ways to sort of look at metrics of a team. But
Yeah.
you know, are they the best? I don't know. Maybe the best right now. Maybe there's others. I also like to look at, you know, I very much believe in learning teams and growing teams. And does this team have responsibility for their work? Are they taking time to learn outside of writing code? Are they spending time together learning new ways of writing code or new processes? Are they experimenting? You know, how this kind of goes back to like, how do you measure the effectiveness of a single person in an ensemble team? Well, I don't know. Maybe you ask them, you know, maybe that's it. But yeah, I'll roll back around. DORA metrics, good. You know,
Yeah, but I do agree they're not enough, because you can have wonderful DORA metrics, okay, and top you know, maturity level, but you're not really delivering any value. You're deploying 1,000 times a day, zero change failure rate, mean time to recovery is a couple of seconds. All of that is good, but at the end, you're not really making any money out of whatever you're delivering. So,
right.
So
there's other things on top of that.
So yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Okay, that's great. So if we have no more questions, I think yeah, we can close the episode here. Paige, that was a wonderful presentation and a wonderful episode. I personally enjoyed it very, very much. And we definitely need to be doing more, because at Tek Caffe, we really want to promote Fluid, okay? Because I personally believe it is a very good way of work. And yeah, so we want to be doing more sessions. So I hope you have the time to join us again in coming episodes. And be sure that once you are done with this new endeavor, we will definitely host you and see what has come of that.
Yeah, and that would be fabulous. I'd love to come back and talk more. And you know, it seems that it's such a complex, again, going back to the complex endeavor, there's so many parts to it. I think there are a lot of places that we didn't necessarily touch other than very lightly or not at all, that we could continue to have discussions about, and that would be great. I also want to encourage everyone to feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email or whatnot. I'm very passionate about talking about this, and I'm more than willing to have a coffee chat or spend some time and have a discussion. So thank you very much, Ahmed. It looks like you might have frozen up there.
So let's announce the coming thank you very much, Paige. And let me take this chance before we close to announce our coming episode. I'm just trying to add that to stage. Yeah, so Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so sorry for that. It was a little glitch. So yeah, I was actually closing the episode. So we're having a new episode next month about eBPF. So it's going to be a little technical. We're going to be talking about this technology that can be used in service mesh. So don't miss out. And yeah, we'll be announcing more episodes very soon. So stay tuned. Follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and visit our website to learn more about our services. Again, thank you very much, Paige, for being with us. And thanks to all of our followers and attendees. And we'll see you in the coming episode. Thank you very much.
Thank you.